Hey guys, the Wheelspin Report here, back once again with another video. I have been focusing on school lately, so I apologize for the lack of uploads. Please like and subscribe as it really helps the channel, and thank you once again for the support. Let's get into it. NASCAR, the National Association of Stock Car Auto Racing, was founded on February 21st, 1948. The average NASCAR fan or newcomer to the sport may know that although the organization began formally on that date, its roots can be traced back some 30 years before to the Prohibition era when moonshine runners would smuggle illegal liquor with their heavily modified cars. And of course, when it ended, they had to race those cars, and it needed a governing body, so NASCAR was created. But we all know those basic few explanatory sentences when NASCAR's rise and exact origins are far more complex and hazy. NASCAR did not go from a bunch of federal criminals trafficking alcohol across state lines to having dash-mounted digital rear-view mirrors overnight. From roughly 1919 to 1948, it took some essential fundamental developments and far more afterwards to become what it is today. Those initial developments are what we will discuss today as we delve deep into the birth of stock car auto racing.
From the minute that I met you, baby, you were hanging your chains on me, and I loved you so I nearly lost my mind. So I paid the great pretender, said I wanted to be free, hoping I would win your love in time. Soon we were together, and I was so proud of you. We told ourselves that we were doing fine, but something stood between us. What it was, I never knew. I guess you had a different kind of mind.
We can only know how stock car racing began by knowing what Prohibition is. Prohibition began as a call for the ban on the sale, production, importation, and transportation of alcohol by certain religious groups initiated on the local level that rose to the ins and outs of the federal government. Prohibitionists believed that society had fallen to the wayside of alcoholism, which caused further violence and political corruption. Those two scapegoats soon found their way into Congress, and on January 16, 1919, the 18th Amendment of the Constitution was ratified. I cannot imagine a life without beer in the refrigerator or experiencing college without alcohol, and it seemed that the folks back in the 1920s thought the same way. But lurking deep in the upper and lower Appalachia in the east of the United States were people who felt the same. However, these people loved to drink and get wasted, and wanted to simply apply other people with more potent alcohol to make it a little easier. Long before Prohibition, these stronger drinks existed in the form of moonshine. Manufacturing and distilling moonshine was a delicate practice, and with the onset of Prohibition, it needed to be done in complete secrecy. There was no better place to do this than the dense temperate rainforests and the rising and falling backroads on the foothills of the Blue Ridge and Great Smoky Mountains. But there was a faction that wouldn't stand idly by and let it happen, and that faction was none other than the 5-0. These shiners, as they were called, all started from a very young age experiencing the ways and means of crime. Running moonshine proved extremely lucrative, but with a high risk of detection by law enforcement. To evade the law, the shiners would heavily modify their vehicles. Shiners would spend most of their time not loading, but tuning their vehicles to maximize horsepower and roll in the corners while carrying a heavy shine, such as adjusting the suspension and even fitting additional engine carburetors. The shiners would not only build fast cars, but would build the cars to be untraceable at night. Switches to kill their exterior and interior lights were common, carrying several forged and stolen license plates to change their identity as well. The driver behind the wheel set the shiners apart from the law. Every time they would modify their cars, the police, known then as the revenuers, would bring more powerful and modified police cruisers. One person who worked both on shiner and law enforcement vehicles was Bud Moore, who spent hours making good money for both sides of the game. The shiners, over time, became highly talented drivers. They had to be proficient at night driving in the tight corners of Appalachia, most of which they spent driving without headlights. The revenuers would chase the shiners for hours until they ran out of gas or the suspect escaped, which happened most of the time. The shiners' vehicles could hit well over 100 miles per hour in first gear, while the police cruisers were topped at 95 and drive like boats in the corners. Whatever local sheriffs that were not already paid off would try to dip in on the pursuits by carrying extra fuel to try and stay with the shiners. This hardly ever worked, but when it did, they would make a pretty penny impounding their vehicles and selling their bootleg liquor off duty. You could say this was the dawn of early NASCAR strategy. The smuggling of illegal liquor dragged on long after Prohibition into the 1930s and 40s, when it experienced a surge in popularity due to the aftershocks of the Great Depression. Often there was no work in places other than running shine. A night of running shine would land smugglers nearly $3,000 due to the tasty tongue of those who longed for hard liquor after the end of Prohibition. This time saw the rise of more talented smugglers and drivers, some of whom would become NASCAR's founders. I will now hand it off to Darian from Black Flags Matter to introduce you to one of these shiners, Junior Johnson.
Junior Johnson was born in Wilkes County, North Carolina in 1931 to a family of bootleggers and shiners. His father, Robert, was a bootlegger who spent most of his life in jail and lived a life of crime. Junior remembers the revenue agents coming and frequently going when he was a kid, seizing vast amounts of illegal liquor. This became so frequent that his mother would leave out coffee and food for the agents when they took breaks from hauling liquor barrels. Whenever Robert Johnson was out of jail, he taught valuable life lessons to Junior, such as never to lie, cheat, or steal. Junior began his smuggling career at the ripe age of 14 without even a driver's license. He would drive hours each night from the Steel to associated speakeasies, sometimes running into issues along the way, being forced to siphon gas from a farmer's tractor. Remembering his father's lessons, he left $200 in cash to pay for the gas. When Junior was not running moonshine, he would enjoy a pastime in which many other smugglers and adrenaline junkies would take part: racing. These unsanctioned races blossomed throughout Appalachia, smugglers using their moonshine cash to fund their careers and build tracks. He would consistently build faster and faster cars, with each race drawing the attention of many other drivers to come out with their vehicles and try to beat him. Many smugglers and bootleggers would join the fun, running unsanctioned, borderline illegal races for cash prizes. Some of these bootleggers, such as Raymond Parks, would make their racing operations more and more organized. Parks brought the idea of running these cars with a team as a business, bringing other NASCAR pioneers such as Lloyd C. and Roy Hall. When these bootleggers like Junior Johnson, Raymond Parks, and Lloyd C. weren't running shine, they were racing and working on their cars. This up-and-coming obsession with speed and adrenaline, growing by the day with business-like influence, attracted the peering eyes of business mogul Bill France Sr.
Born in Washington, D.C. in September 1909, Bill France Sr. grew up around fast cars and loved them dearly. France often skipped school to get involved in local racing, even going out to Maryland to race on a board track, making it home in time before his father not to arouse suspicion about cutting class. France moved to Daytona Beach, Florida in 1935 to escape the horrors of the Great Depression. He set up a repair shop on Main Street in Daytona Beach after working previous unstable jobs. What made Daytona Beach so much better than DC for France was its history with racing, particularly the land speed record. Before speed records made the pilgrimage out to Utah, they took place on the compact sandy beaches of Daytona. One such person that France soon recognized as making moves in Daytona was Sig Hogdal. He had been participating in multiple land speed record events in Daytona, and their increasing popularity for spectators brought the city council to ask Hogdal to organize a race. And that he did in March of 1936 on the newly created Daytona Beach and road course. The race never finished its intended distance with numerous technicalities, lacked clearly defined rules, and ended up a total disaster, costing the city and Hogdal well over $20,000, which is $250,000 in today's money. Bill France competed in the race and finished 5th, but since the results of the drivers were disputed above him, there is a slight possibility he won the race. Hogdal and France teamed up the following year, destined to run a more successful race. They did just that, but still failed to achieve a profit. Hogdole, running low on money, backed out of track promoting. France took over the job in 1938 and began running a profitable operation in Daytona. France would put on more and more races, with smugglers and bootleggers flocking to the beaches to participate. Lloyd C. would make a few starts until he won in August of 1941. The racing would be halted due to the outbreak of World War II, but would come back after the war with a completely new look. One major problem with France's operation dealt with money. Promoters, some of whom France hired, would skip town with the profits, leaving the races to rot. With this, France realized he needed to organize his efforts further. He formed a think tank that convened at the Streamline Hotel's rooftop bar in 1947. The group consisted of loyal promoters, drivers, officials, and many others. They conjured up some of the sport's first rules, and after 69 days, they emerged with a new idea. The National Stock Car Racing Association, NasCAR. What in the world? But that name was already taken. So thank God they returned and rearranged it. The National Association of Stock Car Auto Racing. That has a good ring. And so in February 1948, NASCAR was born, and the rest is history. So yes, NASCAR was created by criminals. I can't think of any other sport in the world that was founded on that. Genuinely remarkable and badass. As you know now, the story of NASCAR's founding is much more complicated than a bunch of guys evading arrest with fast cars. NASCAR would go on in the coming decades to be a staple of culture in the American South, further spreading as far as California and to every corner of the United States. Thank you for watching this video. I want to thank Darian from Black Flags Matter for reaching out to me to collaborate on a video. This would not be possible without him, as he was my biggest inspiration in creating this channel. With that being said, this has been the Wheelspin Report. Catch you next time.